The Galactic Council chamber fell silent as the transmission from the Sol system crackled through the speakers.
Ambassador Zextai of the Vorthan Empire leaned forward in his biomechanical chair, his four eyes blinking in sequence as he processed what he had just heard. Around the massive circular chamber, representatives from 47 different species sat in stunned silence. "Play it again," commanded High Counselor Marinka, her crystalline voice echoing through the vast space. The ancient Kethari had witnessed the rise and fall of a dozen civilizations, but even she seemed shaken. The message began once more, broadcast from a small blue planet on the outer rim of the galaxy. The voice was calm, measured, almost conversational. It belonged to someone calling themselves Director Sarachin of something called the Human Resistance. "To any who can hear this transmission," the voice began, "this is the final message from Earth. We want you to know that we did not go quietly. We want you to understand what you have awakened." Ambassador Zextai's claws clicked nervously against his armrest. 3 months ago, the Vorthan fleet had arrived at the Sol system to claim it for the Empire.
It should have been routine.
The system contained a primitive species that had barely achieved faster-than-light travel.
Their ships were crude, their weapons laughably outdated.
Intelligence reports suggested they might put up token resistance before accepting integration into the Empire as a servant species.
The conquest had indeed been swift.
Earth's defenses crumbled within 72 hours. Their spacecraft were destroyed, their cities bombed into submission, their governments dissolved.
It was textbook subjugation, exactly as the Galactic Doctrine demanded when dealing with emerging species that refused voluntary integration. But, then, the humans had done something unexpected. Instead of surrendering, they had vanished.
"You came to our world expecting us to kneel," Director Chen's voice continued. "You expected us to beg for mercy, to accept our place as your servants. You studied our transmissions, our entertainment, our diplomatic overtures. You thought you understood us. You were wrong." The message paused, and, in that silence, Zextai recalled the reports from the ground commanders.
Entire human populations had simply disappeared overnight.
Cities that had been bombed into rubble were found completely empty the next morning. No bodies, no survivors, no trace of where millions of people had gone. Underground facilities that should have housed thousands of refugees were found abandoned, their contents systematically removed.
"Humans have been preparing for contact with alien species for over a century," the voice resumed.
"Not the hopeful, peaceful contact our dreamers imagined, but the kind of contact our strategists warned us about. We built bunkers beneath our cities, not just to survive nuclear war, but to survive invasion. We developed technologies you never detected because we hid them beneath our primitive facades. And we planned for the day when someone would come to subjugate us."
High Counselor Marinka's crystalline form dimmed slightly. "How did our intelligence miss this?"
Military advisor Krunty H., a heavily armored Belgrani, spoke up. "Their technology signatures were consistent with a Type 0.7 civilization.
No evidence of advanced defensive capabilities. No sign of widespread military preparation." "Because we wanted you to see exactly what we wanted you to see," Chen's voice answered, as if she had heard his words across the void. "While you were cataloging our television broadcasts and radio chatter, we were building. While you were analyzing our primitive rockets and chemical propulsion, we were perfecting technologies you haven't even dreamed of." The transmission quality shifted slightly, and background noise suggested the speaker was no longer planetside. Zextai felt a chill run down his spine.
"By now, your ground forces have discovered that Earth is empty.
7 billion humans have simply vanished.
Your commanders are probably telling you that we've retreated to hidden bunkers, that we'll eventually run out of supplies and surrender.
They're wrong. We haven't hidden. We've left."
The chamber erupted in murmurs and clicks and whistles as representatives from various species tried to process this information. Krunty H was frantically typing commands into his tactical display, trying to contact the Vorthan fleet still stationed in the Sol system.
"Impossible," muttered Counselor Veltar, the hegemony's representative.
"We detected no evacuation.
No fleet movements.
No ships capable of transporting that many individuals. You detected no ships because you were looking for ships, Chen's voice continued, her tone growing colder. You were looking for metal hulls and fusion drives and all the conventional signatures your sensors were designed to find. You never thought to look for what we actually built. The transmission quality improved again, and now there was definitely the hum of shipboard systems in the background.
Impossible as it seemed, the humans were broadcasting from space.
For 200 years, your galactic empire has followed the same pattern.
You identify emerging species, classify them as either useful servants or dangerous threats. The useful ones you integrate. The dangerous ones you eliminate.
But, you've made a category error with us.
You thought we were primitives to be enslaved. You never considered that we might be the dangerous ones. Ambassador Zextai's communication implant chimed urgently. A priority message from Fleet Admiral Ketho SS in the Sol system.
With shaking claws, he activated the encrypted channel. The Admiral's voice was tight with barely controlled panic.
Ambassador, we have a problem. Long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures moving through the outer system. Whatever the humans built, it's big. And it's heading our way.
The Galactic Council operates on a simple principle, Director Chen's voice continued.
Might makes right. The strong dominate the weak.
Well, we're about to show you just how strong we really are. The transmission paused again, and, when it resumed, there was a new edge to the woman's voice. Not anger exactly, but something colder.
More calculating.
You made one critical mistake in your assessment of humanity. You looked at our wars, our conflicts, our violence, and you thought it made us primitive. You saw us fighting each other and assumed we would be easy to defeat. But you missed the most important lesson our history teaches.
Humans don't just fight. Humans win.
Grunty H was now receiving reports from multiple sources. Fleet positions throughout the galaxy were reporting strange contacts on their sensors. Ships appearing out of nowhere, using some form of faster-than-light travel that didn't match any known technology. Every empire that has ever existed has made the same mistake, Chen continued.
They believe their current dominance is permanent.
They grow comfortable, predictable.
They assume their enemies will fight according to the rules they've established. But humans didn't learn warfare from your tactical manuals.
We learned it from ourselves, through thousands of years of constant conflict.
And the first rule of human warfare is simple: there are no rules. The chamber's main display activated, showing a tactical map of the galaxy.
Red dots were appearing at an alarming rate, each one representing an unidentified contact in previously secure space.
They were everywhere. Hundreds of them, perhaps thousands, moving with purpose toward major fleet concentrations and administrative worlds. You wanted to know about human technology? Chen's voice asked. Let me enlighten you.
While you've been perfecting energy weapons and force shields, we've been working on something far more practical. We don't need faster-than-light travel when we can fold space itself. We don't need massive ships when we can phase matter in and out of normal spacetime.
We don't need to fight your fleets when we can simply appear inside your defensive perimeters. High Counselor Marinka was now frantically coordinating with military commanders across the galaxy. Every report painted the same picture.
Human ships materializing inside defended systems, ignoring shields and sensor networks as if they didn't exist. But technology is just a tool. Chen's voice had grown quieter now, more personal.
What you really didn't understand about us is something much simpler.
You thought you were conquering a planet of individuals who would surrender when faced with superior force. Instead, you attacked a species that had spent its entire evolutionary history learning one fundamental skill: how to kill things that are bigger and stronger than we are.
The first reports of actual combat were coming in now. The human ships weren't just appearing inside defensive perimeters.
They were inside the ships themselves. Boarding parties materializing directly on command bridges, in engine rooms, in weapons control centers.
Fighting that bypassed every conventional defense.
Your fleets are impressive, Chen acknowledged. Your weapons are powerful. Your soldiers are well trained. But, you've been fighting the same enemies for so long that you've forgotten what real warfare looks like. You've forgotten what happens when someone fights not for conquest or resources or political advantage, but for survival.
The tactical display was now showing chaos across multiple sectors. Fleet after fleet was going dark, their last transmissions describing impossible attacks by enemies that could appear anywhere, strike at will, and vanish before effective countermeasures could be deployed.
You wanted Earth, Director Chen's voice concluded.
You can have it. It's an empty rock now, no use to anyone.
But, in taking it, you've made a mistake that will haunt you for whatever time you have left.
You've shown 7 billion humans exactly what kind of galaxy they live in. You've taught us that peaceful coexistence is impossible. You've demonstrated that in this universe, it's conquer or be conquered.
The transmission quality began to fade, but Chen's final words came through clearly.
We learned the lesson well. See you soon. The chamber fell silent as the transmission ended.
Around the circular room, representatives from 47 species stared at displays showing their fleets under attack by an enemy that seemed to exist outside the normal laws of physics and warfare.
Ambassador Zextai looked at the reports flooding his communication systems.
In less than 6 hours, the humans had somehow managed to launch simultaneous attacks across 17 sectors. Military installations that had stood unconquered for centuries were falling to boarding parties that appeared from nowhere. Ships that had never lost a battle were sending distress signals that cut off mid-transmission. High Counselor Marinka's crystalline form had dimmed to almost nothing.
How many? She asked quietly.
Military advisor Krunty H consulted his displays with shaking hands. Initial reports suggest coordinated attacks on over 200 strategic targets.
Fleet strength estimates.
He paused, checking the numbers again.
Fleet strength in affected sectors has been reduced by 60%. And the attacks are continuing.
Impossible, whispered Counselor Veltar. 7 billion individuals cannot simultaneously assault targets across the entire galaxy.
The logistics alone. Unless, Ambassador Zextai said slowly, they're not using our logistics.
Not using our understanding of space and time and physics. The displays flickered, and, for a moment, the chamber's communication systems picked up another transmission. Brief, but clear. A different human voice this time, younger, with a slight accent that the translation systems couldn't quite place.
Phase 2 commencing. Remember, no survivors who fired on civilian targets. The rest we offer surrender. Once. Then, silence.
In the aftermath of that silence, as reports continued to pour in of impossible attacks and vanishing fleets, the Galactic Council began to understand that they had made a fundamental miscalculation. They had attacked what they thought was a primitive world full of potential slaves. Instead, they had just declared war on a species that had been preparing for this exact scenario for over a century. A species that had spent thousands of years learning how to fight enemies that were bigger, stronger, and better equipped than they were. A species that had never, in their entire history, accepted defeat as permanent. The war for the galaxy had begun. And, for the first time in over 1,000 years, the Galactic Empire was not winning. 3 weeks had passed since the first human attacks, and the Galactic Council chambers bore little resemblance to the orderly diplomatic forum it had once been. Emergency lighting cast harsh shadows across hastily installed military communication arrays. Representatives who had once debated trade agreements and cultural exchanges now huddled around tactical displays showing the systematic dismantling of their civilization. Commander Yaktel of the Hegemony Defense Corps stood before the main strategic display, his 6 arms manipulating multiple data streams simultaneously. The picture they painted was worse than anyone had dared imagine. The Kepler sector fleet is gone, he reported, his voice hollow. All 47 ships. No distress calls, no debris fields, no survivors.
They simply stopped responding 18 hours ago. High Counselor Marinka had not left the chamber in 72 hours.
Her crystalline form, usually a brilliant azure, had dulled to the color of storm clouds.
How is this possible?
The Kepler fleet was our most advanced battle group.
Because we're still thinking like this is a conventional war, said a new voice from the chamber's entrance. The assembled representatives turned to see Admiral Sarah Chen walking calmly into the room.
Not a hologram, not a transmission, but physically present. She wore a simple black uniform without rank insignia, and moved with the confident stride of someone who owned the space around her. Every weapon in the chamber turned toward her instantly. Energy rifles, plasma cannons, and exotic defensive systems all locked onto the human commander.
She didn't seem to notice.
Admiral Chen, I presume, High Counselor Marinka said, her voice carefully controlled. You have considerable courage, coming here in person.
Do I? Chen looked around the chamber with mild curiosity. Or do I just understand something about this situation that you don't? Ambassador Zextai felt his claws extend involuntarily. You are under arrest for crimes against galactic peace. Surrender immediately.
Chen smiled, but there was no warmth in it.
Crimes against galactic peace? That's interesting coming from someone whose empire has enslaved 43 species and exterminated 11 others. But, sure, let's talk about my crimes.
She walked casually to the center of the chamber, ignoring the weapons trained on her.
3 weeks ago, you attacked my homeworld. You killed approximately 50,000 civilians in your opening bombardment.
You destroyed cities that had stood for centuries.
You wiped out irreplaceable cultural sites. You did this as a show of force, to convince my species to submit. Your species was offered the opportunity for peaceful integration, Counselor Veltar interjected. Standard protocol for emerging civilizations. Standard protocol, Chen repeated slowly. Submit or die. Join your empire as servants or be eliminated as a threat. Yes, we received your offer. We spent considerable time discussing it.
She stopped walking and turned to face the assembled representatives.
Our answer is no.
Military advisor Krunty H activated his tactical display. You are one individual standing in a chamber full of armed representatives of 47 species. Your fleet, whatever impossible technology it uses, is not here to protect you.
Surrender, and perhaps we can negotiate terms. Chen laughed, and the sound was genuinely amused. My fleet? Advisor Krunty H, I think you're still misunderstanding the situation. May I?
Without waiting for permission, she activated her own display device. The chamber's screens flickered and, then, showed a real-time tactical map of the local system.
Red dots marked the positions of the Galactic Council's defensive fleet.
Hundreds of ships in carefully coordinated formations, representing the military might have a dozen species.
Now, Chen said, touching a control, let me show you where my people are. Blue dots appeared on the display.
They weren't scattered around the system's edge as would be expected of an attacking fleet.
They were everywhere.
Inside the defensive formations, docked to ships, sitting motionless next to command vessels, positioned throughout the space stations and orbital platforms.
We've been here for 2 weeks, Chen explained conversationally. Every ship in your defensive fleet has human personnel aboard.
Every station, every platform, every defensive installation.
We're not outside your defenses. We are your defenses. The chamber erupted in chaos as representatives frantically tried to contact their fleets. Admiral Yaktel was shouting orders into his communicator while Ambassador Zextai demanded explanations from his military advisors.
Chen waited patiently for the noise to die down. The interesting thing about humans, she continued, is that we're very good at hiding in plain sight. While your sensors were looking for ships and energy signatures, we were walking onto your vessels through dimensional gates that opened directly into your corridors. While your security systems were scanning for weapons, we were assembling them from materials already aboard your ships.
High Counselor Marinka had gone completely transparent, a sign of extreme distress in her species. What do you want? That's a much better question, Chen acknowledged. What we want is very simple. We want you to leave human space alone. Forever. We want you to acknowledge that Earth and her colonies are off limits to any galactic authority. We want formal recognition of human independence.
Impossible, Counselor Veltar snapped.
No species has ever been granted complete independence from galactic authority.
The chaos, Chen interrupted, would be considerable.
Which brings me to the second thing we want.
We want you to change your policies regarding emerging species.
No more forced integration. No more conquest disguised as diplomacy.
Species that achieve spaceflight get to choose their own destiny.
Commander Yaktel looked up from his communications console, his face pale.
Admiral, I'm receiving reports that our fleet commanders are no longer responding to orders. The ships are still there, but they're not under our control.
Because they're under ours, Chen confirmed. Every vessel in your defensive fleet is now operated by human crew members. Your people are safe, by the way. We don't kill unless we have to.
But your ships belong to us now.
This is an act of war against every civilized species in the galaxy, Marinka declared, her form flickering with rage. You cannot possibly believe you can fight all of us. Chen's expression grew serious.
Counselor, with respect, we're not fighting all of you.
We're fighting the idea that might makes right.
We're fighting the assumption that advanced species get to dictate terms to emerging ones. We're fighting an empire that has grown so comfortable with domination that it can't imagine any other way of existing.
She gestured to the tactical display. Your fleets are powerful. Your weapons are advanced. Your soldiers are brave.
But you've been fighting the same kinds of battles for so long that you've forgotten what warfare actually is. You've been playing games with rules and formations and conventional tactics.
We've been preparing for war. Ambassador Zextai was receiving constant updates through his communication implant. Fleet after fleet was reporting the same thing.
Ships still functional, crews unharmed, but command and control completely compromised.
Human personnel had somehow infiltrated every major military installation in the sector. How, he demanded.
Our security protocols, our sensor networks, our defensive systems
are all designed to detect threats, you understand, Chen explained.
Energy weapons, projectile weapons, explosive devices, hostile boarding craft. You never thought to defend against enemies who could phase directly through your hull plating. You never considered that someone might build weapons from the raw materials in your own supply compartments. You never imagined that the maintenance worker who's been aboard your ship for months might not be who you think they are. She activated another display, this one showing what appeared to be personnel records.
Thousands of them, representing crew members throughout the galactic fleet.
As the representatives watched, human faces appeared superimposed over the alien features. Engineers, technicians, support staff, even some officers.
All human.
All in positions where they could access critical ship systems.
We've been infiltrating your fleets for over a year, Chen revealed.
Every time you recruited personnel from recently contacted species, some of them were ours. Every time you hired independent contractors for repairs or upgrades, some of them were ours. Every time you thought you were dealing with harmless civilian traders or refugees, some of them were ours. Military advisor Crunty H was staring at the display in horror. The resource costs alone, the coordination required, this would take. The resources of an entire species, Chen finished.
Which is exactly what it took.
Crunty H, you've been thinking of this as a military operation.
It's not. It's a species-wide mobilization.
7 billion humans, all working toward a single goal, ensuring that what happened to Earth never happens to anyone else.
The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in.
This wasn't a conventional war between fleets and armies. This was something unprecedented in galactic history, an entire species acting as a single coordinated force.
You have no idea what you're unleashing, Counselor Veltar whispered. The economic disruption alone will destabilize dozens of systems. The political chaos will be your problem to solve, Chen said bluntly. We're not trying to conquer your empire. We're not trying to rule the galaxy. We're trying to change it.
And if that means some temporary chaos while you figure out how to coexist with species that won't submit to your authority, so be it. She touched another control, and the display changed to show shipping routes and trade networks throughout the galaxy. Human-controlled ships were positioned at critical junctions, capable of disrupting commerce across dozens of sectors. Phase 3 begins in 6 hours, she announced. Every major trade route, every supply line, every communication relay in the galaxy will be under human control.
Not permanently. Just long enough to make our point.
High Counselor Marinka's form had stabilized into a deep red color, indicating resigned acceptance.
What assurance do we have that you'll honor any agreement? What's to stop you from simply taking over the galaxy once you've demonstrated your power? Chen's expression softened slightly, showing genuine emotion for the first time. Because that's not who we are. We're not conquerors. We never wanted to rule anyone.
All we wanted was to be left alone to develop our own civilization.
You took that choice away from us. Now we're making sure no one else loses that choice. She gestured to the tactical display showing human forces throughout the galaxy. Do you see any occupied worlds on that map? Any enslaved populations? Any forced labor camps? We could have taken any target we wanted. Instead, we've focused exclusively on military assets and infrastructure. Because this isn't about conquest. It's about freedom.
Freedom, Ambassador Zextai repeated slowly. You speak of freedom while holding hostage every ship in our fleet. I speak of freedom while demonstrating that your fleet can't protect your empire from a species that refuses to submit, Chen corrected.
The question you need to ask yourselves is, what happens when the next emerging species sees what we've accomplished?
How long before others decide they'd rather fight than surrender? The Chamber's communication systems activated, carrying priority messages from across the galaxy. Reports of human forces seizing control of mining operations, manufacturing facilities, research stations. Everything was coordinated, everything was precise, and everything was designed to demonstrate that the Galactic Empire's control was an illusion. This is bigger than just humans and the Galactic Council, Chen continued.
This is about the future of galactic civilization.
You can continue trying to rule through force, in which case every species you contact will eventually become your enemy. Or you can learn to coexist with peoples who consider freedom more important than safety. She turned toward the chamber's exit, then paused.
You have 72 hours to decide. After that, we implement Phase 4. What's Phase 4? Commander Yaktel demanded.
Admiral Sarachan smiled, and this time there was nothing pleasant about it at all.
Phase 4 is when we stop playing defense.
The Galactic Council had 72 hours to make their decision. They used 71 hours and 58 minutes. Ambassador Zextai stood in what had once been the most secure chamber in known space, watching as Admiral Chan reviewed the formal surrender documents on a simple tablet device. Around them, the representatives of 47 species waited in silence. The emergency lighting had been replaced with normal illumination, but somehow the chamber still felt like a bunker.
These terms are acceptable, Chen said finally, setting down the tablet.
Though I notice you've been very careful with the language around territorial boundaries.
High Counselor Marinka's crystalline form had returned to its normal azure color, though stress fractures still marred her surface.
The Council recognizes human sovereignty over all systems currently inhabited by your species.
However, defining the boundaries of human space remains complex.
Chen smiled, and Zextai had learned to be wary of that expression.
Counselor, I think you're still thinking in terms of traditional territorial control. Let me clarify something for you.
She activated her portable display, showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Instead of the neat color-coded territories that had defined galactic politics for centuries, this map showed something far more chaotic.
Streams of movement, networks of connection, patterns of influence that cross traditional boundaries. Humans don't think territorially, Chen explained. We think relationally. Every species that wants protection from forced integration is now under human protection.
Every world that chooses independence over subjugation is now part of our network. Every trade route that operates on voluntary cooperation rather than imperial mandate is now secured by human forces.
Ambassador Zextai studied the display with growing alarm. You're describing half the galaxy.
I'm describing every part of the galaxy where sentient beings have chosen freedom over security, Chen corrected. Which, as it turns out, is most of it. The past 3 days had revealed the true scope of human infiltration. It wasn't just military vessels and defensive installations. Human agents had been embedded throughout galactic society for over a year, making contact with resistance movements, independence groups, and dissatisfied populations across dozens of species. When Phase 4 had commenced, it hadn't been a military assault.
It had been a galaxy-wide revolution.
The Altarian Republic declared independence 6 hours after your deadline expired, reported military advisor Crunty H, consulting his constantly updating displays. The Centauri Trade Federation dissolved their mutual defense pact with the Empire. The Outer Rim colonies have formed their own confederation.
The economic disruption alone will be temporary, Shen interrupted. Trade will resume once it's based on voluntary cooperation rather than imperial coercion. Economic systems will stabilize once they're built on mutual benefit rather than exploitation. Yes, there will be an adjustment period. But the galaxy will be stronger for it.
Counselor Veltar had been silent for most of the proceedings, but now she spoke up.
Admiral, you speak of cooperation and voluntary association.
But you've demonstrated the ability to infiltrate any society, to seize control of any military force, to appear anywhere without warning.
How can any species trust that you won't simply become the next imperial power?
It was a fair question, and Shen treated it seriously.
Because we've already had that opportunity, and we didn't take it. Counselor, in the past 72 hours, human forces have had operational control over more military assets than any single power in galactic history.
We could have used that control to establish our own empire.
Instead, we used it to dismantle yours.
She gestured to the tactical displays around the chamber. Every ship we've taken control of has been returned to its original crew, minus weapons systems that violate the new accords.
Every installation we've secured has been handed over to local authority.
Every world we've liberated has been given the choice of its own government.
Commander Yaktel looked up from his communications console.
Admiral, my reports indicate that human forces are indeed withdrawing from captured positions.
But they're leaving behind infrastructure. Chen nodded. Defensive infrastructure. Communication networks. Emergency response systems. Things that help emerging species protect their independence.
We're not leaving them helpless against the next empire that decides they're ripe for conquest.
And if one of these newly independent species decides to become aggressive themselves? Marinka asked.
If they use their freedom to threaten others? Then, they'll discover that human protection comes with human expectations, Chen replied, her tone growing colder.
We've been very clear about this. Species that choose independence get human support. Species that choose conquest get human opposition. The choice is theirs. Ambassador Zextai was reading reports from across the galaxy, trying to understand the new reality that was emerging. Admiral, you've essentially rewritten the entire structure of galactic politics in less than a week.
The stability that took centuries to build was built on the subjugation of hundreds of species, Chen finished.
Stability achieved through oppression isn't stability. It's just delayed revolution. We've simply accelerated the inevitable.
She walked to the chamber's main viewing port, looking out at the stars beyond.
Tell me, Ambassador, in all the centuries of galactic empire, how many species voluntarily joined your confederation? How many chose integration over independence when given a real choice? Zextai considered the question carefully. Few, he admitted. Most required persuasion. And now you know why, Shen said. Freedom isn't something you give up for safety. It's something you fight for, regardless of the cost.
A new voice entered the conversation as Dr. Elena Vasquez materialized near the chamber's center.
Not through any door or transport, simply appearing as if she had always been there.
Several representatives reached for weapons before recognizing her as another human delegate.
Sorry I'm late, Vasquez said casually. Phase 5 took longer to implement than expected.
The chamber fell silent. Chen had mentioned 4 phases.
No one had heard of a 5th. Phase 5? High Counselor Marinka asked with obvious trepidation.
Education, Vasquez explained, activating her own display. We've uploaded human historical archives to the communication networks of every species we've made contact with. Complete records of our development, our wars, our mistakes, and our triumphs.
Everything from the first cave paintings to the development of dimensional fold technology.
The display showed data streams flowing across the galaxy, carrying terabytes of information to every world with the technology to receive it.
Why? Counselor Veltar demanded.
What purpose does this serve?
So everyone can understand exactly what they're dealing with, Chen answered.
For the past year, you've been making assumptions about human capabilities based on limited observations.
Now you have the complete picture. Vasquez nodded.
Every species in the galaxy can now read about the Mongol invasions, the 30 Years' War, the World Wars, the Cold War. They can study our philosophy, our literature, our scientific development. They can understand exactly how a species learns to fight enemies that are bigger, stronger, and better equipped. But, more importantly, Chen added, they can learn about human concepts like democracy, individual rights, and consensual government. They can see what it looks like when a species values freedom over security.
Ambassador Zextai felt a chill as he understood the implications. You're not just changing galactic politics. You're changing galactic culture. We're offering an alternative, Chen corrected.
For the first time in galactic history, emerging species will have access to the complete knowledge base of a species that chose freedom over submission. They can learn from our mistakes instead of repeating them.
And, if they choose to follow your example? Commander Yaktel asked.
Then, the galaxy becomes a very different place, Chen acknowledged. A place where species cooperate because they choose to, not because they're forced to. A place where strength is measured by what you build, not what you conquer. A place where every species gets to write its own story.
High Counselor Marinka studied the data streams on the display.
This will cause chaos. Revolutions across dozens of species. The breakdown of established order.
Yes, Chen agreed simply. It will. Change is chaotic. Growth is disruptive. Freedom is messy.
But, the alternative is continued subjugation, and, we've demonstrated that's no longer possible.
Dr. Vasquez activated another section of her display. Phase 6 begins in 1 hour.
Even Chen looked surprised.
Phase 6? Elena, we discussed this. 5 phases were sufficient to achieve our objectives. That was before I finished analyzing the galactic communication networks, Vasquez replied. Admiral, there are over 40,000 species in the galaxy.
We've made contact with less than 1/10 of them. Most are still pre-spaceflight, but they're monitoring galactic communications.
They know what's happening out here.
She gestured to the data streams.
Phase 6 is invitation.
We're broadcasting an open message to every species in the galaxy, regardless of their technological level. We're letting them know that when they achieve spaceflight, they have an alternative to imperial integration. The chamber erupted in protests from multiple representatives.
The implications were staggering.
Instead of dealing with occasional emergence of individual species, the galaxy might soon face hundreds of worlds choosing human-style independence over traditional integration. Chen raised her hand for silence. The invitation is simple, she said over the noise. Develop space travel at your own pace. Choose your own government. Build your own culture. And, when you're ready to join the galactic community, you can do so as equals, not as subjects. This will destabilize everything, Counselor Veltar protested. The economic systems, the political structures, the military balance. Were already unstable, Chen replied. They were held together by force and the threat of force.
Now that we've demonstrated that force isn't absolute, those structures were going to collapse anyway. We're simply offering something better to take their place. Ambassador Zextai looked around the chamber at his fellow representatives.
All of them were receiving reports from their home governments, trying to understand how to adapt to a galaxy where empire was no longer the dominant political structure. What happens now? He asked quietly. Chen returned to the formal surrender documents, signing them with an old-fashioned ink pen. Now you learn to coexist with free species. You discover that cooperation achieves more than coercion. You find out what the galaxy looks like when every species gets to choose its own path. She set down the pen and looked directly at each representative in turn. Some of you will adapt well to this new reality. You'll find that free partners are more reliable than enslaved subjects. Some of you won't adapt, and you'll spend decades trying to rebuild your empires. Those efforts will fail, because every species you try to subjugate will know that humans will support their independence. Dr. Vasquez finished her preparations for Phase 6. The invitation broadcasts in 30 seconds. Once it goes out, there's no taking it back. Every pre-spaceflight species in the galaxy will know that Imperial integration isn't their only option. High Counselor Marinka's crystalline form reflected the chamber's lights in complex patterns. You realize this could lead to centuries of conflict? Species that choose independence might also choose aggression. Some might, Chen acknowledged. And, when they do, they'll discover that the human alliance includes species that remember what it's like to be conquered. They'll find themselves facing not just human technology, but the combined determination of every species that values freedom over domination. The countdown reached 0, and, across the galaxy, receivers began picking up a new kind of signal. Not the usual demands for submission or offers of imperial protection. Instead, a simple message of possibility. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Alliance, her recorded voice began, broadcast simultaneously to thousands of worlds. We want you to know that when your species achieves spaceflight, you will have a choice. You can join existing political structures as subjects, or you can maintain your independence as equals. The choice will be yours, and we will help you defend whatever choice you make. In the council chamber, the representatives watched as their entire understanding of galactic politics dissolved around them. The Age of Empire was ending, not through conquest or collapse, but through the simple demonstration that alternatives were possible. One last question, Ambassador Zextai said as the formal proceedings concluded. The last message from Earth. Director Chen said it wasn't a plea, it was a threat. What exactly were you threatening? Admiral Chen gathered her documents and prepared to leave. We were threatening to show the galaxy what free species are capable of, she replied. We were threatening to prove that independence is achievable, that empire is optional, and that freedom is contagious. She paused at the chamber's exit. Turns out we weren't bluffing. As the human delegation departed, leaving behind a galaxy forever changed, Ambassador Zextai realized that they had witnessed something unprecedented in galactic history. Not the rise of a new empire, but the end of empire itself. The last message from Earth hadn't been a plea for mercy. It had been a promise of revolution. And, now, as thousands of species across the galaxy began to understand that they had a choice, that revolution was just beginning.